So ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, right now we would like to continue to the panel discussion in the topic of the needs for AI governance. So we'd like to take this opportunity to invite our distinguished speakers, start from Dr.Paisan, Ruamviboonsuk, together with Dr.Nawanan, Theera-Ampornpunt, Professor Urs, and together with Dr.Sak, Segkhoonthod as our moderator. So I would like to hand over the microphone to our moderator for this panel discussion. Please welcome Dr.Sak เชิญค่ะ
โอเคขอบคุณครับโอเคอย่างที่ทางพิธีกรเราบอกนะจะเป็นภาษาอังกฤษนะครับ so I'm gonna moderate this session in English because otherwise Professor Urs wouldn't understand. So as I mentioned during my talk that health is our first priority in terms of working out what would be the AI governance framework for the health sector for Thailand. Okay, as you know that there has been a number of AI services for the health sector for some time. Probably คุณหมอ Nawanan may start with what do you think in terms of the use of AI for the health sector? What is your expectation and what is overclaim? You always say that, but why people think a little bit too high for the technology? Okay, so may I ask Dr. Nawanan to start with this question first.
Yes, and thank you. I'm glad to be back at ETDA and for this question. First of all, this is an exciting time for AI. We have seen a lot of application and a lot of great performances of AI these days. For healthcare, I would say more generally, not just AI, but health IT has a great potential. We have known that for many decades now, how health IT can help provide information to the healthcare professionals and policymakers in the time and point of care and point of decision making. Many cases in the past, we have seen health IT in various forms. For example, electronic health records, computerized physician order entries, and so on. Those systems often are routine systems. However, the limitation is the decision making. And when we talk about decision making, we have a term called clinical decision support systems, CDS in health IT. The term CDS more broadly could include logical software like alerts and reminders and many other things. However, AI and expert systems have been around since the 70s, applied in healthcare, but the performance was not that great at the time. So when we talk about AI these days, I would say we need to look at the past. We need to look at what we have done and how what are the lessons learned from the many decades in the field of health informatics. However, I would say because of the limitation of healthcare, where we are dealing with life and death, but we are dealing with things that we are trying to find ways to improve the lives and the healthcare, and we still see the limitation of the human capability. And so I think AI have a role. However, the key is you are dealing with life and death. That's the key, and that touches on the point that I often make elsewhere, that don't be overly hyped with AI, but try to see it as a tool. And as a technology, but as a technology that may be useful in some cases, or maybe harmful in some cases. The key is to find the right balance, and then that is the governance idea.
Okay, so I think we got the picture that what AI should be used for the healthcare. Okay, I would like to ask คุณหมอ Paisan, Dr. Paisan, because he is the one who actually doing it, with the project with Google, as I remember. Please tell us what this project is all about, and what you learn from doing this project with Google.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for allowing me to join this session. It's a great opportunity. Well, actually, I think the main problem for Thailand is that we have not too many eye doctors, but we have a lot of diabetic patients in Thailand. We have like 4 to 5 million people with diabetes in Thailand, but we have only like 1,500 to 2,000 eye doctors. The thing is, the diabetic patients have to see eye doctor at least once a year for detecting eye disease. So we do not have capability of having the eye doctors to see each patient with diabetes. So I started this project back in like around 2000, the year 2000. At the time, we already have the fundus camera, the camera that can take the picture of the retina. The retina is the thing at the back of the eye. When we have diabetic eye disease, it involves the retina. We call it diabetic retinopathy. So we are able to take the picture at the back of the eye of diabetic patients, and we are able to tell by looking at the picture if the patients have diabetic eye disease that need to be referred to see eye doctors. So we are able to use the camera and the picture to do the screening. So at that moment, actually, we have a kind of machine learning that we're able to read those images with a certain level of accuracy. The thing is, well, the sensitivity of machine learning at that point is quite high. It's around 80 to 90%. But the thing is, the specificity of the machine learning at the moment is only like 50%, 40 to 50%. So, well, I take a look at the machine learning at that point, and, well, we have, actually, we have a kind of, we call it mid-level ophthalmic personnel all through the countries. We have ophthalmic nurses, we have technicians who take the pictures. So I think, well, why don't we try to train all these personnel to read the images, to see if they can be better than machine learning at the time. And we're able to achieve like, well, accuracy of around 85%. So we have like specificity 85%, which is around the same as the machine learning at the time. But the specificity is much higher than machine learning. We can achieve like 85% as well, which is much higher than machine learning at that point. So at that point, we decided to train the personnel all through the countries to do the screening instead of using machine. And we're trying to do it for some time. And the government of Thailand, Ministry of Public Health, used the indicator of having diabetic patients screened for eye disease, like 60%, as an indicator for the whole country. It turned out, well, we used the trained personnel to do the screening, to take the picture and read the picture for the screening, and to detect cases to refer to ophthalmologists. But we achieved only 50% for many, many years. And the thing is, well, if I remember correctly, in the year 2016 is the first year that there's a report from the Google Health team that they're able to use a new kind of machine learning called deep learning. And they're able to read the same pictures. With the accuracy now is like more than 95%. Okay. Yeah, the sensitivity and specificity, both parameters, is more than 95%. So I take a look at our trained graders, our trained screeners. Well, we can achieve like 85%, but they said they achieve like more than 95%, like 96 or 98%. So I think it's time to maybe just ask them if they want to validate their algorithm, their machine learning, the new kind of machine learning called deep learning in the Thai populations. So I asked them, and they said, why not? So we joined together, and we used the images of more than 10,000 patients in Thailand to validate their algorithm. And it turned out, well, it's true that the accuracy is more than 95% in both sensitivity and specificity. So that first study that we conduct together is kind of retrospective study. We use the images that are already in place in the cameras in Thailand. And the next project, so we do a kind of, we call prospective study in like 9 primary care units in Thailand, 4 in Pathum Thani and 4 in Chiang Mai, and 1 in Rajaviti Hospital in Bangkok. So we have the patient come to the clinic and have their picture taken, and the AI read the images like right away and give the screening result to the patient right away. Patients know at the time, at the point of care, if they should be seen by eye doctors or not. And we're going to refer them to see eye doctor if the screening is positive. And it turned out, well, the accuracy is still very good. It's still like, the sensitivity is like 91%, and the specificity is like 96%. So at the moment, at this very moment, we are doing a kind of, we call implementation research. We are doing it like at all the health regions in Thailand. We are doing this study in 12 regions in Thailand. Each region, we have a primary care unit, like county hospital, paired with the provincial hospital. And we do the screening at the primary care unit. And when we see the positive cases, we're going to refer to the provincial hospital. Currently, we are doing it. And this morning, before I came here, we just have a discussion with the team. We have the Google team, and we have the DMS team, which take care of this project since the beginning. We have the third party, which is a Thai company, that they are writing the software, the platform, a Chrome-based software that can be used with AI, Google's AI. Google's AI is only algorithm, but the company in Thailand write a code for the platform that we use for the AI. We have a meeting with the company, with the member from the DMS, Department of Medical Services, our team, together. And we have it like that, the meeting each week. And we're going to do it like, for, I think, about 6 weeks to see, 6 months to see how it goes in terms of implementation.
Okay. Well, I think it's good news. It means that the AI is actually, help the doctors in Thailand, in this case for the eye doctor. But may I ask Dr. Nawanan again, because he's a member of the National Data Protection, Personal Data Protection Committee, in terms of data governance, especially for the, this kind of data. What do you think? What should we do about that?
So first of all, when we talk about data protection, we need to imagine that is a scale with the right balance. So data that sits there and is not used may not be very useful. However, use without safeguards is also something that is not very ethical either. So the balance in this case, for example, you need data to train AI. For instance, obviously that data is personal data that could lead to privacy issues. The question would become: do you need creating and training AI like that make sense and have real use in the real world? First of all, or do we think that this AI has already there is something that's great exists already in the world, and there is no need for this kind of research? If we pass that. That means that kind of research and innovation still is very useful in the real world. Then there is a need for data. Can we anonymize the data? Right. If you anonymize the data and that kind of is another safeguard that helps with terms of people would feel more comfortable with their privacy and not feeling that the data is abused or business use. However, in some cases, there may be a need to have personal data that cannot be anonymized or cannot be fully anonymized. And in those cases, there would be someone as a third party, like an ethical committee, to evaluate the need and the risk and see if that is ethical and up to the standards. There are ethical standards in medical and health research internationally. So once we go through that, then the PDPA, the Personal Data Protection Act, will come in if we use personal data, because health data, if it's personal data, is sensitive data.
Yeah.
And so there's a requirement that if you do research with sensitive data, you need to have safeguards according to the committee's directive. Although we have not announced the subordinate law yet. So once we have that, that would be a requirement for how the safeguards of the data when we use sensitive data or other general personal data for research and R&D.
Right.
So that's the kind of governance in terms of data that is based on data protection and PDPA law.
Right.
Once we go with that, then the rest would be perhaps on ethics, on the conduct of research overall.
Well, are you saying that what Dr. Paisan has been telling us, what he has been doing, could be thought of as for the research purposes? But once, for example, I don't know if, imagine if Google would say, okay, this is, working. Why not, make it commercial, something like that. And that would be another purposes. So it means you have to, some sort of a new way of regulating.
Well, if the product use data and the data, when you use data and you have provided, you have told the patients what you are going to collect, what you're going to use, or there are other safeguards like anonymization, as we said, or other things. That's one part. And once you have the product, that product can be commercial, can be public domain or whatever. I think that's a separate thing. However, that's perhaps an issue of intellectual property. And that intellectual property, and also how to make sure that that application of AI is fair and applied equitably in the real world and doesn't discriminate or doesn't lead to poor practices. That's another aspect of governance that outside the scope of data governance per se, but perhaps is another part of the governance clinic that we need to touch on. However, on the other side, let's say there is a product like AI and that collects another set of data. That's another new issue. For example, we sell, let's say we have Dr. Paisan create a company, and that company use that AI that has already been trained to apply and diagnose, provide certain services to patients. That then would be another separate issue for PDPA and data protection.
Right. Well, what I can conclude at this moment is that PDPA agency, I don't know what to call it in English, okay, would be one of our, ETDA, AG, this clinic main partner, I would think, okay, and you as a committee would, help us in, coordinating to, in working together.
I would be honored to.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, let me move to Professor Urs. What do you think, listening to these two doctors discussing about using AI in the healthcare, what in the EU, what kind of governance framework or regulation when, using AI for the healthcare? Can you share with us, Professor Urs, please?
Sure. Thank you. First of all, thanks so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here. Congratulations on the launch of the AI Governance Clinic to Dr. Paisan and Dr. Sak. It's a wonderful initiative. So just a couple of reflections before zooming in on the European landscape and maybe also compare it to the US a little bit. First of all, what I'd like to highlight when we think about governance or regulation, and it comes in we have different tools in the toolbox we can use, right? We have law, but we also have standards. Technical standards was on your slide too that you showed. We have ethical norms, so we have different tools. So altogether we call them governance typically. So when we think about governance and medical AI, a few things that came out in the exchange. First, there is much at stake, right? So on the one hand side, we've heard about the tremendous potential that AI-based technologies have to improve patients' life and, to help people like you and me. And then on the other hand side, as you also pointed out, there is significant risk and there are challenges along the way. And so from a governance perspective, one of the really hard questions is, you mentioned it, the need to balance and safeguard. Well, what do you emphasize at a given moment in time? And if you regulate too quickly and too heavily, then you may kill the innovation that you want to see. And if you're overly protective, for instance, you don't allow any data collection, well, then you won't have AI that works, because as we heard, AI needs data. On the other hand side, if you're, as a regulator or a governance maker, if you don't some sort of put the safeguards in place, as we discussed, right, you run the risk that you hurt people, that you may have bias in the data, or that something else may go wrong. And so it's actually really tricky, considering also that AI is, despite its relatively long history, is now only recently making its way out of the lab and becoming relevant in our daily lives. And so as a regulator or as a governance body, it's really hard to find that sweet spot between regulating and some sort of allowing innovation to take place. Now, where you are on this spectrum also is shaped by culture, by overall attitudes, by risk tolerance. And that's interesting where the comparison US and Europe comes into play. You see over and over again, when it comes to governance and technology, that the US tends to favor an approach to governance that enables innovation. And Europe tends to be more on the side of a precautionary principle, which is to say, to be more risk averse. Now, just kind of one footnote, and we can talk more about that. With AI, it's even more fascinating, because you can also argue that to have a strong governance framework in place and to have the right rules in place will actually promote the trust in the technology. So the way I think to look at it is not, okay, you regulate or you don't, but the question is, how do you design regulation that, yes, you manage risk, but also you increase the likelihood that the technology is adopted and used in a responsible way. So suddenly governance becomes an enabler and not just a barrier to innovation. And I think that's what we're after.
I'd like to stop you at that point, because you mentioned the word risk. Okay. Give example of Dr. Paisan was telling us about using AI for the reading the eye. What are the risks?
Well, yeah. Well, we think about this from the beginning. In fact, for medicine, I think it's, well, when you are doing research in medicine, we are lucky that we have some kind of regulation from the beginning, because the proposal of doing research had to be approved by the institutional reviewing board. So, well, all of the studies, no matter it's AI or not, we have to get approval. Right. And the project that I mentioned get approval before we start the project already. And the thing is, well, for doing AI, it's a little bit different from other research, because it deals with data. And it's the data from patients. So as Dr. Nawanan said, we have to de-identify data of patients. For example, the picture of eye of patients. Well, some pictures may have like the name or ID of patient attached to, but we need to delete all those.
Okay, we have to
yes. We need to only upload the pure images for the AI to read.
Right. Yeah. So the risk of being identifiable is removed.
Yes. But the thing is, well, as I mentioned earlier about the accuracy, sensitivity, and specificity, there's no way that you can have like 100% accuracy. If some tests tell you that the tests have like 100% accuracy, you don't believe it, right? It's unbelievable. Right. So there's still certain risk of like, well, you may have like false positive or false negative. So, but this is the same as before we apply AI, right? Right. When we train our personnel to read images, we still have a proportion of false positive, false negative. Right. I tell you that, well, we like to have them have accuracy of around 85%. So still, that is the same thing. We need to inform the patients. We need to inform them.
Right.
In this project that I mentioned, we even have like them sign the informed consent, just like other studies.
I see.
Yeah, that this is a risk that they may have to take.
Okay, Dr. Nawanan, I think you're going to add on.
I would like to add on the risk, and the most obvious risk that people would talk about is privacy, but I would say privacy is the least of our concern, in my opinion, because healthcare is about life and death. I would say when you look at AI in medicine, think of it like a lab or a drug. A lab in the case that you use AI for diagnosis. A drug, if you use AI like a treatment, as a recommendation for treatment. The false positives and false negatives are the obvious risks that, depending on the disease, in some diseases, for diagnosis, the diagnostic error that result from false negative, for instance, would be delay in treatment, or could be something else like you go to the wrong path in the treatment. However, the false positive would lead to incidental finding or findings that are not real. It doesn't. The disease is not there. The concern, there's mental concerns and other things that they need to go through during the diagnosis and treatment phases. That is the risk to the patient as well. Now that depends on the disease and the specialty. In this case, I would totally support this kind of AI application, assuming the performance is at least well enough or useful enough, depending on you use it as a screening tool or as a confirmatory tool as well. So in healthcare, diagnostic tests, the concept of diagnostic test could be used for screening or for a confirmation. When you want to confirm a certain disease. So those things are things that I think, depending on the disease and the specialty, that pertains to risk.
Yeah, may add one more thing. Well, we even have overreader in our project. So it means all the positive cases going to be read by the retinal specialist to confirm that it's really positive. If it's false positive, we have a mechanism of having our personnel to call the patients that this is false positive. In terms of false negative, false negative means you don't have to go to see doctors, right? But we random the images like 10% of negative cases to be read by the overreader as well. So this is a mechanism that we, conduct to lessen the amount of false positive and false negative in our study.
What do you think, Professor?
I mean, just to jump in, I mean, these are so important examples and illustrations also of the tools we have available to manage and mitigate some of the risks. And what you were describing is a version of a human in the loop, right? Where there is still a human being involved, and it's not just delegating the decision to the machine. And so overall, and also going back to your earlier point, I think the real challenge also from a societal perspective, but also from a health community perspective is how do we organize the interplay between the machine, the AI system, and human beings, of course embedded in our organizational complex. You mentioned that, and context, you mentioned it before. There are many different players working together so that we get the best out of what the machine can do better than humans, right? And where we get the benefit out of the human, where the humans outperform the machines. Now, there is some good news. We have some experience, right, how to do that. Think just about the airline industry and what's happening in cockpits, right? If I fly from Munich to Bangkok, the likelihood that much of the heavy lifting and processing is done by a computer is very high. And it's probably good for everyone on the plane, right? But we also know there are instances where actually there are challenges because the computer may get it wrong. It may get confused if something is wrong with the sensor or whatever it is. And that's where you still need the human and the pilot. And in that example, the industry has developed quite specific norms and rules. For instance, at what moment in time the pilot is allowed to override the autopilot, so override the computer and whatnot, right? So there are airlines saying, well, in bad weather conditions, under no circumstances, the human intervenes because the computer will always be better. And I'm using it just as an analogy that, we have systems where, by the way, lives are at stake as well, where we have some sort of learned a bit how to do it. Now, I think there is one important difference to the kind of systems you were describing, which again makes it challenging from a governance perspective. Quite often the systems we used to in the past, the technologies, we were able to test them. And then when, independent, let's say a regulator tested the tool or the device and approved it because it complies with certain standards, you can just release it on the market and you're fine because you tested it and safety requirements, check the box, check the box. Now with AI, with many of these AI systems we're talking about, they continue to evolve in the wild, right? As more data becomes available, the system starts to evolve as well. And so from a regulator's or governance perspective, this is a paradigm shift because it's not only good enough to look how the tool is performing when you release it on the market, but essentially you have to work together with the organization and people using the system. You have to think about performance tests, documentation, error culture, how to learn from mistakes continuously and create feedback loops, then how you improve the system that you started with in the first place. And that gets much more complex, especially also because you have many more players involved. And so from a governance perspective, that's kind of new, right? So we may have experience with things like the cockpit and autopilots, but here the complexity is higher, and I think, again, AI in medicine is a great example. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that Dr. Paisan say is that he said that he used, 10,000 images. Most of them are from Thai people, right?
No, all of them.
All of them from Thai people. Imagine if I'm a Myanmar, can I use this algorithm to detect, symptoms?
Actually, this is a question that I asked the Google team from the beginning, because their algorithm started from, they derived it from images from the US and India, and they validated in the data set from patients in the UK. So this is a question that I asked them. If your algorithm can work well in Thailand, so we prove it in our study. The first study that you mentioned, more than 10,000 patients, that the first study that we proved that the algorithm works well in Thailand's data as well. So, well, according to your question about Myanmar, so I suppose, well, I assume it should work for Myanmar patients as well, because it's been validated in the UK populations, which is Caucasians, and it's been, approved in Thai populations, and population in Myanmar and Thailand is pretty similar, I think. It should work as well.
What do you think, Dr. Nawanan?
I think the AI bias has been increasingly recognized in the past few years. So obviously, we need to look, I'm being open-minded here, we need to look at the performance, the process of training and development of the AI, which would tell us what's the validity in the process and what's the data, the population. That would, in medicine, we call it external validity and generalizability. How much do you think the result of that AI prediction can be generalizable to other populations like Myanmar people, for example, in your case? So that question is a question that I think there's no right and wrong, but the question depends on the methodology of how you develop AI, how you train it, and how you validate it. What's the performance of the validation? Those are the things that I think I would personally look for data and evidence for that in order to answer your question. However, I think one thing that we need to be mindful is the people's trust on the technology, that I think is the key. When we talk about governance, the governance doesn't focus on the AI itself, the product itself, but alone, but should focus on the people around it, as the Professor Urs told us as well. For example, let me tell you a story. In Thailand, I heard this story from one of my medical colleagues in health IT. There is a product, an AI that is used to predict tuberculosis from chest X-ray film, and the AI has been trained, I think, using data from, I think, prisoners or something, or maybe using data from Thai population. It performed pretty well, but when the real doctors in a certain province in a hospital see the prediction and compare with the images, they could not find any abnormalities with the chest X-ray that it could explain what the AI is recommending. However, doctors are afraid of misdiagnosing because the AI told us so. So, well, do I treat or do I not treat? That could lead to treating people with tuberculosis, even though the patient may not even have tuberculosis. And again, we need to train the people to understand that AI is not perfect either. And also, we might need to come up with some, if it's a drug, there is a product sheet coming with the drug when we buy the drug from the pharmacy, right? What about AI? How do we be able to inform the users of that product, of that AI, about the process of developing and the evidence, the performance, in order for them to be well informed and apply it critically, not just blindly follow the recommendation. I think that's the key to it, the whole dilemma that we are having.
Okay. Professor Urs, what do you think about this issue?
I can only echo this importance of human-centric engineering, right? That sometimes we think of AI as in the first instance, a technical problem, and we can get better at the technology and more data and better algorithms and so forth. And we've made tremendous progress. But I think what you're pointing out is, again, this kind of life cycle view and ecosystem view that ultimately these technologies are made by people. They're commercialized. They exist in an organizational context like a hospital. They're embedded in professional practices like, doctors have a code of ethics, right, signed up to. And so the question really becomes, even from this narrower perspective of the profession, how do we educate, how do we train, how do we upgrade some of these norms of practice on the one hand side that physicians can make the right decision, that they understand the limits of the technology. So it shifts from what we think is an engineering problem focused on technology to something that's much broader and goes to the humans that are using these technologies and of course the patients ultimately as well. And to me, that's perhaps the biggest challenge. I see some sort of a great promise work with professions, right, where you have the medical community and you're teaching at medical schools and so forth. So it feels when it's professional education, we can change the curriculum, we can give the knowledge and work on these issues. I think what you also pointed out too is some sort of the public at large, right? Because it's one thing if we develop technologies and get to use them, but what about the population at large, the patients, the people who may not be experts at all in AI? And that's much harder. And I think with AI it's tricky because the types of techniques you mentioned, deep learning, there are obviously numerous techniques that can be used in AI. They're not straightforward to be explained to people who, for instance, don't have STEM education the way we have it here sitting on this panel. And so to gain this trust, to some sort of share enough information about these systems and how they work and what the limits are with the public at large, that's a really, really, really big task. And I believe we have to start with the kids, right? Of course, we have a challenge also with elderly people and so forth. But I do think we have to take a hard look at what we are teaching, even in primary schools, and what are the basics within STEM that you need to understand so that you can develop data literacy or that you can understand what machine learning roughly is doing. And that's a long-term project. We won't fix that by creating a strategy or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
May
please.
I add a little bit? Well, I echo the points of both of the speakers. AI is not doctor. Well, today we talk about AI in medical field, but AI is not doctor. They're just doctor's helper, doctor's assistant. So, we don't believe in the result of AI 100%. So that's why we have the overreader in our project. So, in case that Dr. Nawanan mentioned about the chat X-ray, AI may guide us to take a look at something carefully, but we don't really believe in AI. And to answer your question about Myanmar patients, for Thai patients as well, so I think to answer your questions correctly, we need to do a research. We need to validate any algorithm that's going to be used in Myanmar patients with Myanmar's patients. I assume that it may work, but actually we need to do that. So this is the point that I need to stress. If you have a kind of AI algorithm, AI model that you want to use for Thai patients, it should be tested, it should be validated in Thai people before you actually deploy it or implement it. I think it's not fair for Thai people to have the AI from somewhere else, and then there's an advertisement from the company, and then use it for the patient straight away. We need to test it, at least in a certain data set that you have a kind of like standard.
It seems to me that data bias would be one of the important aspects for using AI in health, right? Dr. Nawanan?
Yes.
So imagine, if we agree that this is what we should do, what would be the governance model of, I don't want to use enforcing, governancing it. What should be the best model in your opinion?
I'm not sure I would have the right answer out of my mind, my head, apart from Professor Urs might have the idea. But to me, I would think we need to have a platform for stakeholders to talk and engage academically about this with people represented from, people specializing in AI, like people from NECTEC, people who are in healthcare, practicing medicine, like Dr. Paisan, people who maybe the bridge, like myself, where you understand the health and also the technology, and people who understand the law and other aspects. I think the idea of a platform is to have a dialogue, but not to say one is right, one is wrong, necessarily. I don't think the governance clinic will have all the answers for AI application in healthcare. I would say once we have the dialogue, when we have the several viewpoints debated, deliberated, that would lead to more understanding, more mutual understanding, that would lead to us finding the path forward. And I think personally, that is the kind of governance model for me. I would borrow the word, the sentence from Jurassic Park. Once we have the governance, life finds its way.
Right.
So life will find its way once we tackle the problem together with people represented and people listen and speak freely and they understand each other.
Right. No, when Dr. Paisan mentioned that, who would use AI by adopting algorithm from abroad, they should test it on Thai people first, right? I don't know. Maybe you should enlighten me. How about drugs? Do they the same? You should test with Thai people first or not? I don't know. For the FAT Thai, FAD.
Personally, I would say, from my understanding, for the most part, evidence from Thai people would be very helpful because we know genetics and biology, biological responses of different races are different, and lifestyles and environmental factors may come into play. Now, I would not say black or white, you need or you don't need necessarily. I would say it depends on the evidence. For instance, let's say it's a drug, and the drug has been tested almost in many countries from various ethnicities, and the result overwhelmingly support that the drug is supportive, and the risk may be pretty minimal or acceptable. If that's the case, maybe we might want to, look at the evidence elsewhere from abroad, and then decide to, maybe it depends on the FDA, Thai FDA. If they agree, we can apply it. But we should also evaluate it afterwards. So that if that's the case, but if the evidence is not fully that confident, maybe we should test it in Thai people.
Yeah. So, well, that's why I say, well, in the medical field, it's different from other fields a little bit. We need we have the institution reviewing board to approve the proposal of doing research. And we also have the FDA, the Food Drug Administration. I think it's their job to take a look at the AI algorithm. It can be used in Thai people or not. And the thing is, well, this is the policy is different between, among countries. For example, like Japan or South Korea, if you have a new drugs, you should be tested. You should have like a new trials in the people in that country before you approve it. But for Thai FDA, they may have a certain mechanisms. They may not test it in all of the drugs. So I think it depends on the policy of the government.
Well, it seems to me that when I mentioned about setting up AI testing center with NECTEC, maybe it's what we actually need right now. Start to exercising the data testing, especially for the health sector. Okay, Professor Urs, what do they do in the EU regarding using AI in like this case?
Well, there's how much time do we have, right? Europe is very active in regulating pretty much everything when it comes to technology. So I don't want to bore the audience with kind of a description or overview of what's happening, but just kind of maybe 2-3 things. One, building up on your points about the question of the data sets and specifically whether these data sets live up to certain quality criteria, for instance, the inclusiveness and the diversity of the data in terms of race and gender and ethnicity and so forth. That's interesting that both the European regulators, when it comes to health applications and AI, as well as the FDA in the States, are essentially agreeing on that requirement, right? Now, what's also interesting is that there are different ways how to go after this goal. And again, the European regulator here, looking at the AI Act, which is in the making in Europe, is much more detailed what kind of criteria need to be tested in whatever setting it is to be in compliance with the requirements, versus the FDA is more describing what the objective is. And how you get to the objective is left more or less to those who need to be in compliance with the law. So, for instance, the manufacturers or the developers of AI systems, right? And so you see again this nuance. Are you very prescriptive in how to ensure that some of these challenges are addressed? That's kind of more the European approach, and the US approach is more to define the goal and then leave more flexibility also to the stakeholders and standard setting organizations, professional bodies. And to me, that's perhaps the more suitable approach. So I would endorse your suggestion to say what we need to invest in is to build a capacity where different stakeholders can meet and learn from each other. And I think the AI Governance Clinic is such a platform. And then, of course, what we also need, I think, as some sort of the flip side of the coin, is also to have clear red lines. And that needs to be law, right? So what are things that we don't want to see and we don't leave the process of learning to deal with, right? So, for instance, if you say, do no harm, right? That seems a pretty good idea in the medical field, and it's not a new idea either. And so you can think about bright lines, red lines, don't cross them, but then have goals, and you had on your screen like core values and goals you want to achieve, and then leave it also a bit more to the professional bodies and standard setters and stakeholders to figure it out. The last thing I want to say is, what is also important in my view is, where are the patients, right, in all of this? And so to include representatives and you know, the perspective also of the patients in all these conversations going to be key. So we can't just leave it to the experts. I think this is exactly one of the key learnings as we are changing the operating system of society. we need to involve citizens and people, and we need to be very mindful about that, which again is not an easy challenge to involve, because you need so much knowledge to meaningfully participate in the conversation.
Well, I'm going to ask Dr. Paisan that imagine you would treat me, okay, should I be informed that, okay, I'm going to use AI to help me in, checking. Do I permit you to do that? Should I be informed about this too?
Well, it's going to depend on what objective is yours. So, well, I think there are different kinds of AI models out there, and well, for certain objective, I think AI models works well. If you ask me for that Theera-Ampornpunt, you can have like a certain accuracy, like more than 95%, but still like 5% of inaccuracy. Yeah, I think it depends on, well, the objective, which I think I'm not sure how some, well, for ophthalmology, I'm an eye doctor. For eye disease, some of the tests, AI may not perform well. So in terms of classification, screening disease, they perform quite well. But in terms of prediction of disease, they have the accuracy of 70%, which is not very good, but it's still well a thing that to be worked in the future. But the thing is, well, if you have a certain kind of eye disease that need injection, the model may be able to tell you if you're gonna need a high volume of injections or low volume of injection with the accuracy of 70%. And I have to talk to you. So if you accept the prediction of 70% or not. But well, I think for prediction, it's still not in use for AI. For classification of disease, I think it's okay.
Dr. Nawanan, what do you think?
I think it's a challenge whether to inform and not inform, because of the nature of healthcare, where we call it information asymmetry, where doctors know a lot more in the medical field than the customers, the patients. So if you tell them, can they comprehend everything in order to critically decide for themselves? Perhaps that's the key. Or if you look at the patient's point of view, do they have the right to be informed? That's another dilemma. I would say personally, let's look at one basic example. It's a very primitive AI in healthcare that is used very commonly. In EKG, electrocardiography, when we look at the rhythms of the heart, actually the equipment will have a small AI that would detect the pattern and suggest whether the patient have normal rhythm or some abnormalities. However, they're not perfect. And typically doctors use that as just one piece of information, and doctors who are experts and know how to read the EKG will read the EKG themselves. But doctors who are less less familiar with some patterns may, like myself, maybe I'm out of practice for some time now. Maybe I would look at the data, look at the AI output as some information. Now, do we inform patients every time we do an EKG test that we are using AI? I don't think so. However, because for the most part, the clinicians are the one who look at the information and make a decision, and we are accountable from that decision. We need to follow the standards of care, and we are bound by ethics from that standard, that professional ethics. So I would say if there is the case where the doctors still make decisions with support from AI and elsewhere, the doctors should be informed about the performance of AI and how much we should trust them. But the patient may not necessarily be so. It's assuming based on the need and the literacy of the patients. However, if the AI is automated, fully automated, and the performance is not perfect, in that case, I would say we need to inform. Like for instance, I just recently got a speeding ticket. This is not AI. This is just a sensor. Recently, I got a speeding ticket. If the machine, the sensor that read my speed of my car is not perfect, I think I have a right to know because I need to clarify, right? And it's automated. However, if we believe that is a credible information, I think maybe we don't need to tell people everything.
Right. Well, he mentioned about the word trust. And I sensing that, imagine Dr. Paisan, because you develop your algorithm, you're working with it. So you know very well about that. But let's say Dr. Nawanan would like to use your algorithm. How would you make him trust your system?
Well, I'm doing research. I'm doing study to prove that, to validate that my AI algorithm or my AI model works, up to the standard level. So the thing is, well, I may have a little bit of different opinion. I think we need to inform patients everything. We need to inform them. Well, for example, for the piece of the EKG reading, well, there may be level out there that this is normal. I'm not a cardiologist, but I just tell patients that, well, based on the reading on the EKG piece, you're normal. I just tell them this. But I won't tell them the detail that how this level appear here. Well, is that, well, any model or something that write the level over here. So I think the patients need to have information as much as possible. But we have ways of telling patients. Well, we may not tell them complicated things. But the thing is, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, that we have the kind of informed consent that we need the patient to sign. Actually, this is called informed consent because we just don't ask them to sign, but we inform them before they sign it.
Okay. Yeah. So inform, okay.
It's fascinating. Just one thing that comes to mind also listening to you. Obviously, the question of informed consent is an old story in medicine, right? And what are the situations where you don't explain everything or even disclose everything? But with AI, I think there is this additional complexity that we may be at the beginning of a pathway where the technical system gets so complex that even if, as a physician, you want to explain, you can't because it's a black box and you no longer can fully understand what the technology is doing. Now, obviously, the engineering side is also working on that problem, and explainable AI is kind of a buzzword around that. But I think it's interesting to ask ourselves, where are we willing that we don't understand necessarily how the technology works, but still trust the result? So think about search engines. I guess all of us are using Google or something else, a search engine. And even the Google engineers can no longer explain how the algorithm really works because it has reached a level of complexity. And yet we accept that there are limits to what we can explain. And so to me, that's some sort of a fascinating question for the future. Where is our confidence zone? And this, I think, is also, if you look at the history of technology and how to deal with this trust problem. For instance, when it's my favorite topic, but I keep it short, I promise. When the escalator was introduced, people only started to use it when actually a person was going up and down on the escalator to show that there is no harm. The elevator is the same, that there was an elevator operator. There was not a technical reason for it. It was just the human in the loop because it makes us feel better. The technology does exactly the same, but it makes us feel better. And so what's very interesting, if you look at how governance systems are dealing with new technologies and distrust, you have three mechanisms. The first one we talked about, which is disclosure and transparency. So it's very interesting, if you do not know at all how something works as a user, potential user, you don't adopt the technology. But you don't need to have full knowledge how it works. So how the airplane works, well, I know roughly, but I know enough that I can bridge the gap between not knowing and full knowledge, and that bridging of the gap, that's called trust. Wow. So that's the first mechanism. The second one, quickly, is monitoring. So law often imposes obligations to say you not only need to be transparent about how the technology works, but you have to keep track on how it's performing. And we also talked a little bit about that, right? The continuous monitoring and studying and testing of what's happening with the technology once it's in the wild. And lastly, you have liability. And so the question is, okay, if the trust is breached and something bad happens, are we confident that there is actually a safety net even if things go wrong? And these are the three mechanisms. And if you look at it right now, what we're talking about in AI governance and regulation, quite often you find these three elements, and then of course questions of oversight and so forth. But these are trust enablers. So
because I asked Dr. Paisan about, how could you make Dr. Nawanan trust? What do you think the way of using a third party to extend in your
that's great. Yes. Actually, we use third party for the research already. Well, I think the issue of trust we can discuss like 3 more weeks if you stay with us. Well, the thing is, the unexplainable of AI, I think is the field that the engineers are quite interested in at the moment. Because the deep learning is quite unexplainable, but the old kind of machine learning that's quite explainable. So I think this issue, the engineer may solve it or not in the future. The trust issue is very important. We trust, actually we trust the AI because we trust ourselves. Because we validate the accuracy of AI with our expertise. We have for example, in our project, we use the reading of images in the first project, we used 3 retinal specialists to read images as a gold standard. We have a retinal specialist from Thailand, we have the second one from India, and we use the third one from the US. So I think, this is also the third party that you mentioned. We use third party already. That's the way it is for gaining trust from the people. Yes.
I think it depends, but obviously we use third party mechanism all the time, certification and many other things. Even in healthcare, the FDA is a third party who regulates, and that means that we should, whether we trust it or not, apart from the law and the authority, is how well they perform that job. And how well people perceive they perform their job. I think with that, and again, that's back to the keyword of trust. But I think we cannot avoid it. I mean, we cannot rely on the sole party to for everything. I mean, we need third parties to regulate and to look at the performance and what's the right way to go. But so the idea is the trust. But I think we cannot avoid the third party.
Right. And Professor Urs, you mentioned the liability. What do you think that when a doctor uses AI, as a helper, how far liability would go?
So, I think the general trend is currently, and also what the European Union is proposing now, is that we basically use the traditional way how we think about liability also when it comes to AI. So, and if you look at it, it's very much some sort of bottom-up, case by case, and then over time we create typologies. We say this is the duty of care, the standard of care you need to apply in situations like that. So it's interesting that we don't rewrite the rules of liability for AI. That doesn't seem to happen. Actually, the opposite, that we use the laws we have and the principles we have and expand that now to a new field, to a new area where technology and humans interact. So it's fascinating. Personally, I think within that frame, if that's the overall directionality, what really becomes key is not so much the outcome, right? There may be instances where, you know, we have liability rules. If you have a bad outcome, you're liable no matter what. It's not whether someone made the fault or not. It's just, it happened. But in most cases, it's really this idea of the duty of care. And that would include, you know, that the physician is able to document, and the hospital too, by the way, all the way from how we made the purchase decision when we bought the system or the software or the AI application. You know, did we do our homework? Did we get the disclosure? Did we understand the limits? Did we ask about the performance under the circumstances we want to use it, for instance, on Thai people versus people from Myanmar? So all these questions, did we work through that? Are we documented to show we did that now at the level of the hospital when you purchased the systems? But then also, of course, the physician. Did the physician understand that this is now, you know, within the whatever parameters where we have 85% accuracy rate or not, and also to document these steps. And I think that will be the benchmark for liability. If you do that sort of constant questioning, asking, challenging, living up to the best possible standards of your profession, then it's very likely that this is the best we can do, and the court would agree. And to me, I like that, because, you know, it's something that you said, Doctor, before. It makes some sort of AI usage everyone's responsibility. And it's not just checking the box in a compliance sense and then, oh, I checked the box and therefore I'm not liable. Sign here and I'm fine, right? The dotted line is there. No, it needs to be a constant practice of asking, is this the right tool, under what circumstances, and where are the limits? And if that becomes the practice, I think then we really are able not only to unlock the benefit of the technology, but also build and earn, over and over, earn the trust that we were talking about.
Well, my question would be, would the doctor is able to blame the AI if something's go wrong?
Again, it depends on what's the problem. I mean, first of all, we need to understand that when doctors practice and treat patients, bad outcomes could happen to the patient, even though the doctor is not at fault. The doctor doesn't make mistakes still. The same happens with AI. Whether the performance is good or not, whether the outcome is correct or not, if something bad happens to the patient, in some cases, the bad adverse events may not be the AI's fault. That's the first basics. Then, if we look more closely at whether there is something that is not supposed to happen, something preventable, something defective, I think maybe we need to talk about who is at fault, who is liable, and how do we prevent it from happening in the future. In the US, where I was trained in health informatics, there is a legal doctrine called learned intermediary. Learned intermediary means that whether when something bad happens to the patient as a result, when we use IT or other technologies, if something, if there is a human to intervene at some point before something bad happened to the patient, the learned intermediary, the people learned in this case means someone with a brain. So someone who is human and can look at the situation, but they let the situation goes as it is, and that leads to mistakes. They may be at fault, they may be liable. However, if they cannot intervene because it's automated, or if the problem is defective from the product's side, the device, and there is no practical way to intervene before, as a human, as a doctor before, then maybe the manufacturer is liable. So I think this question has been debated in other countries a long time ago. I think that kind of doctrine can be looked at when we talk about liability in AI as well.
Well, I think this is a kind of chicken and egg question. So, well, I think this is one of the reasons why we have this session, right?
Right.
So, well, yeah, I agree with Dr. Nawanan that we probably cannot answer this question at the moment.
Right.
But we need this kind of session, and we're going to move on together to see if we're going to find the answer to your question in the future.
Okay, I think we have 9 minutes before we finish this session. I would like to take questions from the floor. Anyone would like to ask our panelists? Okay, Dr. Thai. Can you? Okay.
I can shout myself. Thank you very much for this fruitful discussion. I heard a lot about the validation of the AI services, mostly come from overseas. But I know that as the AI researchers, we often have to customize the AI systems, and that's not except the medical areas, the healthcare. So I think there will be a practice to adapt or to improve the AI services from overseas to our culture. So do you have that kinds of practice? And later on, how can you manage collaborations or cooperation between our local technologies and the overseas technology?
Maybe Dr. Paisan.
I think this is a great question. Yeah, this is a great question. Well, actually, we just started to implement it. It's still in research, but well, in the future, we have a certain kind of we call it like the phase 4 of the clinical trial for drugs. It's the same thing. It's after approval, after phase 3, you have phase 4 of monitoring, post-marketing monitoring. Yeah, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to monitor the accuracy, yeah, after we implement it for the people in Thailand. So we're going to keep monitoring it. Yeah, I think that's the way of conduct it.
Okay. Other questions? Well, I have one question for you, Dr. Paisan.
Oh, yeah.
When we let Google to use our data, in the future, what do you think that probably Dr. Nawanan would help me answer this question too. What should we do in terms of making sure that our data is okay in the future? You know, I'm talking about data sovereignty or something like that. Do we need control over our data before we releasing them to you know, other countries, if you see what I mean?
Yeah, well, this is also a great question. I think the title of today's session is about trust, right? So when we have a collaboration with Google, we have a kind of like MOC or MOU that we sign together that we agree on that the data, actually, as I mentioned earlier, that we created a kind of platform that's used with the AI. The AI is only algorithm, but all the data been saved in the computer in Thailand. All the data stored in Thailand. Only the image uploaded into Google system, and then they're gonna delete the images after they analyze it. Well, we talk with them if we would like to have the images for monitoring in the future, just like for checking of accuracy in the future, we can keep it in that server, and they're going to use it for monitoring in the future. But we trust each other that they will not use the images for some other purposes.
Okay, that's good to hear that.
Yeah.
Okay, but the question would be probably Dr. Nawanan too. How could we make use of our, in this case, how to say, sensitive data? And you got this data because you are the government agency, so you are able to, use the data. But how about the AI startup, the private company? could they use this kind of data too? You see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, and my answer would be whether it's a public organization or a private organization, still, I would say it comes down to two keywords. First, necessity, and then appropriate safeguards. The organization that needs the data for a certain purpose, do they really need the personal data as they claim? That's the necessity part. And you look at what we call a lawful basis in the PDVA, where whether there is a basis that is legal and lawful for processing that data, once you determine that there is a need. For instance, a private company say that we want to have a new product. And that new product is an AI and requires training from a personal data. My first question is, do you need data? But obviously, yes, right, to train the AI. But do you need a personal data that can be identifiable? Or can you anonymize it? That's another question. Now, that will follow us along the way where we try to minimize the risk. And once we determine the necessity, again, that's the appropriate safeguards. If you decide that you still need personal data that is not anonymized for training or for whatever processing, then what safeguards are there? Data security, encryption, pseudonymization, and so on. Or how do you prevent others from unauthorizedly accessing the data? And do you use the data for something else apart from what you claim to? Those are the things that we need to determine. So a long answer to your question, that is not black and white. I can't say yes or no.
Well, this is a great question as well. In fact, I think Dr. Nawanan said a little bit earlier, I think we have two ways of using AI at the moment. The first way is using AI from other sources. It's like, I'm doing retinal retinopathy screening for some time. And I find that, Google had a quite interesting algorithm. It should be applied to Thailand or not. I have to validate it. So I contact with Google to conduct the study in Thailand. But you can do it from scratch in Thailand as well. You can start from zero.
Right.
You can build your own, you can collect images, retinal pictures of Thai patients, and then you have to label them, right? This is referable. This one is referable. This one is not referable. And you have to train it, to train a model to recognize referable and non-referable cases. And you have to test it in your own data first, internal validation. And you're going to have to do the external validation in a new data set. And you need to do maybe implementation research as well. So it's a long way. So what I mean is I'm doing this for quite some time, for 10 years before I contact with Google. It's if I started from scratch, I'm gonna be a follower, not one of the leaders. So that's one of the reasons why I contact Google to do this in Thailand.
Right.
So we have two ways of doing it.
Good. Well, the reason I mention is because even though AI governance clinic is supposed to help in terms of governance, but at the same time, I think we should think governance has to support or promote the use of AI. How to make sure that Thailand we have AI developers that could compete with other countries as well. Especially your experience, Dr. Paisan.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we talked a bit earlier before this session start. Well, I think the committee that led by the Department of Medical Services, we have a quiet meeting for a few times already. One of our priorities is to creating the national data set.
Right.
We may create it from the data set of eye retinal images. For example, the data set that I use for validation of Google's AI that I mentioned earlier, more than 10,000 patients, right. I keep it. So if there are some AI models in Thailand that analyze the real images, they can use these images for validation if their standard is live up to the Google standard or whatever.
Okay.
So yeah, I think this way we're gonna, if we have kind of national data set for set X-ray, or retinal image or some others, we can like build up like more and more.
Okay, that's good to hear because in the future I think we're going to have more data.
Yeah.
And not just data, but data for AI, I think.
Yeah, but that's not easy.
I know that's not easy, but you've been done it for many years. So
Yes, well,
that's-
it's fragmented, but at least it's our priority. Dr. Patharwin is here.
Right,
He's the head of the digital center of DMS.
Okay. Well, I think it's time now. And I would like to thank our panelists, Dr. Paisan, Dr. Nawanan, Professor Urs, for giving us, I think, very, very interesting opinions and ideas and everything. And of course, it's still a long way to go. Okay, we have to work together. And for ETDA, okay, AI Governance Clinic would be part of the AI plan, okay, led by NECTEC and the MDS. Okay, I would like to end the session right now. Thank you very much.